Hey, everybody, welcome back to another Motivation Monday podcast for Monday, June 24th, 2019. Hope you had a great weekend and hope you're ready to get into the week with a little bit of inspiration. I'm very excited to bring you this week's episode. I promised this to you on one of the regular episodes of the podcast a couple weeks ago, but we managed to get Gary Alesbrook to answer a couple of questions for us and talk a little bit more about that solo that we transcribed by him and kind of broke down and included on one of our Lick of the Month episodes last month. So this is great. We really are getting this information direct from the source, from Gary himself. And I want to start by really thanking Gary for taking the time out to talk about some of the stuff behind the solo, give a little bit about his thinking when it comes to playing a cappella and playing over a tune that's as difficult as Joy Spring. So I know you're going to love this. This is really fantastic. And you're so lucky to be able to hear from the source from something like this. This is an opportunity that we don't get very often. So make sure that you really take note of Gary's answers on some of these questions and try to understand what he's really getting at when he's talking about, the answers to some of these questions that I ask him. Now, Gary being extremely busy touring the world, playing music, teaching lessons, doing all the things that Gary does, we were actually not able to get on a call together at the same time. Our schedules did not line up. But Gary was nice enough to take some questions from me and record the answers to those questions at his own home studio. So what you'll hear is as if we are in the same room, but we are not, which is why there's no real back and forth between us. It's basically just I ask a question and he answers it. So just keep that in mind. But I think you're still going to find this extremely valuable. So without any further ado, here are 3 or 4 questions for the great Gary Alesbrook, talking about some of the concepts we covered in episode number 158, where we transcribed one of his Instagram videos of a chorus of him playing a cappella over Joy Spring. So please enjoy this. I know you're going to love it. So Gary, my first question for you is something we talked a lot about in your episode was how good your time was. So are there any special things that you do with the metronome to develop really good swing in time and really good eighth notes? Any light you could shed on that subject?
Yeah, I think it's really important to practice with a metronome. It's something I've always done over sort of jazz, classical studies, etudes, that kind of thing. But I think it's really important to use the metronome as a tool to challenge yourself to stay in time. So put the metronome click on the 1 and the 3 or the 2 and the 4. Maybe slow the BPM down to sort of 50 or 60 BPM, and that's a real challenge to sort of stay in time if you've only got one click at such a slow pace. And then play eighth notes, triplets, 16th notes, and like I said, use it as a tool. Challenge yourself, and your timekeeping will just improve, so quickly.
Now, another question I had for you that I think a lot of our listeners would like to hear is how much do you practice playing a cappella, and what are some of the challenges of playing without a rhythm section, without a metronome, to make yourself sound like a complete band without an actual band behind you?
Yeah, I practice a cappella quite a lot, to be honest, and like many other musicians, I use the app iReal Pro. Which is great for playing jazz standards. But more often than not, I'll take the drums and the piano out and just keep the bass, because that in itself is metronomic and really good for your timekeeping skills. I kind of think that if you've got the drums and the piano there, then you've just got that safety net of rhythm behind you. So it's a good exercise to take those out and just use the bass line. You said the challenge of sort of like sounding like a complete band. I'm not sure if I'm trying to sound like a complete band, but I'm not being ambiguous in my solos. I'm trying to make it sound like Joy Spring. So I'm trying to spell out those changes to make the tune recognizable.
Something else that we talk about on the podcast a lot is using chord tones on the strong beats to give your playing a little bit more structure and to outline the changes in your lines. Is that something that you think about? And especially on this particular video and transcription that we did, your playing is just so clear. So, do you have any tips or suggestions for something like that, making your eighth note lines on a single line instrument sound as clear as possible?
I certainly think about that more playing a cappella. Outlining those changes using chord tones is not so important when you've got a full band behind you, because they're spelling out those changes. But the reason it's good when you're playing a cappella is it encourages you to keep it simple. I'm not getting caught up in any sort of harmonic acrobatics. It's clear and concise. So my tip is, I think you've encouraged it before actually, is to write out some simple solos over changes, and play those solos.
Okay, and one more question for you. This tune, Joy Spring, is really one of the hardest tunes that I can think of in terms of how many times it changes keys and how many chord changes there are just present in the tune. A lot of, two chord changes to one measure type progressions. Do you have any tips on handling a tune that throws a lot of information at you in a very, very short span of time?
Yeah, don't run before you can walk. Basically, let's get this clear. This is the 1,000th time that I've played Joy Spring. Playing it and playing it. So any time that somebody puts changes in front of you that you've never seen before, you're going to want to, break that down and practice it in small doses. I use that technique when somebody first put giant steps in front of me. You can't run straight into that one. So I'd break it down into 4-bar phrases, and maybe the first time through I'm just playing the root notes of each chord. Then maybe the second time through I'm playing the first 3 notes, let's say, of the scale of each chord, and I'm building that solo up slowly. I remember in college when our lecturers played a tape of Bill Evans practicing piano, and he was playing, I think it was Danny Boy, the song Danny Boy, and he played about 35 choruses. It was an insane amount of choruses, but what was clear was how to build a solo. The first time through he just played the head, he played the tune, and then by the 35th chorus it was quite unrecognisable. But what really stuck with me from that lesson was just breaking it down and just adding to it, chorus by chorus, bit by bit, and until the song doesn't seem so daunting anymore.
All right, there you have it. Gary's personal answers to some of the burning questions we had for him after looking at that transcription. And again, I just really want to thank Gary, who's one of the busiest musicians out there, for taking the time to do this for you guys. This type of advice is invaluable. As I said, hearing it from the source is a lot different than hearing it secondhand from me, where I'm taking something that he did and I'm interpreting it in my own way and kind of putting it out to you guys. But to actually hear it from the person who played it, and a master jazz musician at that, this is really a resource that you should keep with you for a long time. So take this podcast, file it away under, must listen to every couple of weeks or every couple of months, just to gain that inspiration and direct your practicing. Now, I also wanted to let you guys know where to find Gary online and check out some of his fantastic music. So the first place to start is by following Gary on Instagram. He's at Gary Alesbrook on Instagram. And then make sure you also go and check out his website. His website is garyalesbrook.com. And I also want to shout out a fantastic album that I've been listening to pretty much nonstop since I did this transcription and discovered Gary. It's called Jazz in Movies, and you can find that on Spotify and everywhere else that you look for music. Highly recommend that album. There's some just beautiful playing, and it's just a really well put together album and statement of Gary's playing. So make sure you go and support him, because he was nice enough to come on and do this, and he's just such a great player. And again, big shout out to Gary. Thank you for coming on the show, and I hope you all enjoyed this, and this will help you to stay inspired over this week. All right, we'll see you on Friday with a regular episode. Have a great week, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye.